So I think I'm going to start to talk. So good evening, everyone. My name is Richard Baiano, and I'm the president of Child's Gallery. I would like to welcome you to our first virtual artist talk here on Zoom. It's a little bit unusual for me to be here talking to an empty room. Usually, we're welcoming everyone with open arms and glasses of wine, but it has been a strange time. But we are so happy to have all of you here with us, joining us. And we're here to talk about, to talk with the artists Resa Blatman, Joan Hall, and Karen Lee Sobol about our current exhibition, Making Waves. I would like to just say a couple things that as we are talking, if you can remember to have your microphone on mute. What we are going to do is I'm going to start with an overview of the exhibition. I'm going to very quickly go through the slides, tell you a little bit about what we were thinking when we were putting the exhibition together. Then I'm going to introduce each of the artists and let them give maybe a 2-minute little bit of information about themselves. And then I'm going to pose a question to each of them, and then we'll have a question, 2 questions for all 3 of them, and we're hoping that it becomes a conversation. And then at the end, we would like to invite all of you to answer questions. When it comes to answering the questions, we're going to ask everyone to use the chat feature. And I'm assuming that a lot of you are familiar with Zoom at this point, and so you can just type your questions in. If I miss something, I have my trusty gallery members who are willing to let me know things via text. I would like to say, I'd like to start by just saying how grateful I am to the gallery staff, in particular, Julie Edwards and Catherine Fields, because as things went the way that they did, they were so important in being able to transition us to a virtual art gallery, which is effectively what we've been for 3 months. Making Waves was an exhibition that was set to open on March 13th. And it was a number of months in the planning, and we were sorry not to be able to welcome everyone here, but we've done a really good job of getting it out there online, and the artists have all done individual artist talks, and we're just happy that we can have you here virtually to hear them about the show. So now I'm gonna go through some slides that show the exhibition in the gallery. So Making Waves presents the work of 3 women artists, Resa Blatman, Joan Hall, and Karen Lee Sobel. Each used their art to address humankind's relationship to the ocean through different media, including painting, printmaking, and mixed media installation. These artists advocate for the greater awareness of the climate crisis. So the Earth's oceans are vast ecosystems of which only a fraction have been explored. Today, our oceans are greatly endangered by human activity. As this crisis escalates, climate change art bridges the scientific and the visual, making hard data more accessible through an emotional response to art. By helping us process this information, climate change art seeks to effect a meaningful change between humans and their environment. So now I'm going to introduce briefly the 3 artists. So the first artist is Resa Blatman. Resa Blatman is a visual and installation artist based in Somerville, Massachusetts. While deriving inspiration from the negative implications of the science-driven data on climate change, Resa's work never fails to show the beauty of our natural world. So Resa, welcome. Tell us a little bit about yourself.
I have well, I'll just go down the bio. I have a master's in painting from Boston University, but I'm also a graphic designer. Lived in Somerville for now 30 years with my wonderful husband, Stephen Cook. and I have a studio very close to where I live at Vernon Street Studios in Somerville, and I make artwork full time, and my passion lies in nature and the climate crisis, although it veers now to other political issues. So I'm always thinking about the environment and nature. But yes, so that's what my work centers around. And I have been known to be an optimist, but I'm quite pessimistic right now. So, but I'm trying to balance the two in my own head. So that's me in a nutshell.
Well, thank you, Resa.
Sure.
So Joan Hall is our second artist. Joan Hall is a visual artist based in Jamestown, Rhode Island. Joan's passion is paper and the sea. She uses complex printmaking techniques to create highly technical constructions of handmade paper, printed from her own plates, incorporating detritus from the ocean in the making of the plates or in the final works. While Joan's work is primarily composed of papermaking and printmaking, I've always thought of her as a sculptor. Joan, I think you're on mute, Joan.
Careful.
There you go.
Hello, everyone. I started a scrapbook of articles in like 2003. I've lived in Jamestown now for 5 years. I basically lived most of my life in the Midwest, but I was sailing on the ocean, and I've been sailing since I was like 16. My interest sort of evolved from a personal connection and our intertwined mortality to a global concern. The creation of my work is basically driven by concept, excuse me. Sometimes a word or a phrase or an article that I read contributes to the idea. Sometimes it's something I've seen because I spent a lot of time on the water. I basically left the traditional world of printmaking a long time ago. The press is the means by which I transfer this sort of sculptural mark, and I make these plates with collagraph that are very sculptural to the handmade paper, but then they're transformed dimensionally to the wall. And in many ways, the work such as, oops, you passed it already, new normal, that there are numerous parts and pieces that are laminated to mylar and then altered by cutting. And once I take them to the wall, the dance begins, because I respond to the pieces in this very sort of visceral way. Because they're laminated to mylar, they sort of take on their own form as they go. If you give me a wall, I can fill it. The series, The New Living Reef, is a body of work made solely with handmade paper. That's the next piece. Rather than cutting the shapes, I'm blowing the pulp away. But again, I'm reacting to what's being developed on the surface of the mold. In both ways, I really respond to sort of drawing in space. That's how I think of when I'm working. And I never force how the pieces wave or how they form. I sort of work with what they want to do. And these particular pieces are my fantastical world about a mutant reef of flora and fauna that is growing with plastic, because there are already microorganisms in the world that are actually growing in plastic. So beauty is a powerful message, and the sensual quality within my work is something that's very important to me.
Thank you, Joan. So Karen Lee Sobol is our next artist. Karen Lee Sobol is a visual artist, is a visual artist, architect, and author from Boston, Massachusetts. Karen Lee believes in the curative power of art from a psychological and emotional standpoint and uses stream of conscious techniques. Deriving inspiration from the physical and symbolic aspects of nature, Karen Lee seeks to cure the world's ills through the power of art by bringing awareness to nature's fragility.
Richard, thank you. And I want to thank Child's Gallery for hosting this very important exhibition and this Zoom meeting for us. So I'm an Aquarian, and for me, the ocean is life support. And of course, the ocean is Earth's life support system. We all depend on its good health for our own survival, as the ocean regulates the climate and basically nurtures everything that lives on the planet in one way or another. So for me, decades of swimming and meditation underpin the energies and the rhythms that weave through my work and that drive me. And as I swim, as I meditate, I engage, I observe, I feel. It's a sensory situation. I feel empathy for the sea, the plants, the animals that live in it, around it, and above it. And my aim is to share that feeling. I want you to engage, and I want to immerse you and connect you with the life force that's bigger than all of us. The paintings that you see this evening are part of my Goddess series. They speak to procreation, protection, and threat. And these goddesses are in a battle for all of our lives. For me, life is a beautiful place. Each moment holds magic if we just take a moment to notice that. When I was a kid growing up in East Orange, New Jersey, the Garden State Parkway sliced through our town and the quality of the air changed. I became an instant environmentalist. It's the sea, though, and the marine life that I resonate with, and I focus my attention here. My life has been full of science and also full of art. I believe in science, I believe in spirit, and I believe in art's ability to influence our hearts and our minds, and then our actions. Yayoi Kasuma has said, creation is a solitary pursuit. Love is what brings you closer to art. Hope and healing, bridging the waters from sickness to health. This is how I see my life's purpose and why I make my art.
Thank you very much, Karen Lee. So at this point, what I'm going to do is I'm going to start by asking each of the artists a question. And I'm going to allow the artist that I address the question to speak, and then I'm going to allow the other artists to feel free to add their own thoughts to it if they would like. And again, if you any questions that you have as the talk is going on, feel free to include them in the chat. So the first question is to Resa. And so Resa, and this is important for me because I find Resa's works incredibly beautiful. How do aesthetics play a role in the making of an art which is at its core about loss and destruction?
Thank you, Richard. That's a very nice compliment. So I wrote something down and I realized that I gave a really short, boring bio about myself. I didn't realize folks were going to go that deep. I just want to say that I loved what Karen said, and it's very touching. And doing more meditation myself, I feel a closer connection to the environment. I don't want to take too long, but I just want to say I was meditating the other day, and the question came up, "Who am I?" And I thought, I'm an ant. I'm a bug. And then this is not a new thought to me, that we're all part of the same circle of life. And, we come from the stars and we end up in the dirt, and then who knows where we go. But I think it's important to have a connection to the universe and, to the earth, and take care of it, be good stewards of it. So in answer to your question, I wrote this down. Beauty is often scoffed at in the visual arts, but I grew up with an upholsterer father who had an eye for beautiful patterns and fabrics. And those memories infiltrated the aesthetics of my work and my design practice. So we had this little room down in the basement. It was called the material room. And he had scraps and scraps of these gorgeous Baroque fabrics, bolts of fabrics, and I used to play and roll around on it. And it wasn't until a few years ago that I realized that a lot of the elements of my work must have come from those fabrics that I was around. I mean, they were, this was way before nylon and rayon and fake fabrics that we have now. I mean, these were gorgeous patterns that they were remnants from his clients. So I really believe that infiltrated into me and then comes out in my work. And while I make work that speaks to the many climate crisis issues, which are quite dire, I find it a satisfying challenge to take those depressing subjects and make them into tragic and beautiful moments in my paintings, drawings, and installations. My experience has taught me that the viewer will always linger a bit longer in front of an artwork with a message that is delivered with an honest passion and conviction, even if that message is dark and frightening. So as you see here, this is a triptych called Bleachy Reef, and it's about the dying coral reefs. And even though they're dying by turning white, it shows their death, they're still quite beautiful and ghostly, and they still exist even though they're dead. Well, I hope that's an answer to your question.
Sure. Do any of the other artists want to comment on or answer the same question? Joan?
Well, I was just going to say that I think all of us use beauty as this, powerful message. And I think we all realize that the works are intended to draw the gaze of the viewer in, and the viewer, if they spend enough time with our work, they begin to see what the message is. Our messages don't hit them over the head.
Karen Lee, did you want to add something?
No, I just want to add that in each of our work, there's an intricacy and in a way, an intimacy. Back to these amazing fabrics, Resa, that you played with as a kid, things are interwoven. And I feel like, to Joan's point, that helps draw in the eye and the heart, and I hope help lead people through what it is we're trying to convey.
Very nice. So I'm going to move on to the next question, and this one is for Joan. So Joan, many artists focus on various aspects of nature. What is about climate change in the ocean that you find compelling? And I realize that's a huge question for you.
Not really, not for me, Well, it's sort of interesting because I grew up in the Midwest. My father gets seasick on a dock. So my love of the ocean did not come from my parents. And my feeling is that my most cherished memories about the ocean are the first time I saw a magical, endless expanse, and I wanted to be on it. And it wasn't that I wanted to look at it, I wanted to be on it, which is how I started sailing. And then later on in life, I raced from Newport to Bermuda, and the sensation of being at sea without a sight of land makes you feel very insignificant and very small. And that compelling emotion from the ocean is something that I'm always trying to get at in my work, which is, I always tell you, if you give me a wall, I'll fill it. And the bigger space I have, the more fun I have, the more, it's like the bigger I can make it, the more I'm into it. It's like, I want to be in it. I want to be on it. And in terms of climate change, I came to that a little, in a little different way. I found that I was thinking about the fact of our mortality and how we share that in essence with the planet. And that there was like, I'm going to say, I've lost my thought for a minute, that the ocean, I started reading articles about the ocean, that there were cures possibly for cancer. And at the same time, I was collecting articles that were appearing a little bit at a time. In 2003, they would appear here, they'd appear there, but I was cutting them out. And I thought, well, we're killing the ocean, but we're finding cures for cancer. We need to do something to, stop that. And so it went from sort of a personal relationship to that to this sort of global significance. And then I use the sea. I find the ocean, the translucency of the ocean, the movement of the ocean, all of this, that's the beauty that I want to be in my work. But then I want this message about climate change. Like this particular piece, which is also about dying coral, has bits of plastic that I've collected on beaches in it. Sometimes my plates are made with it, but in this particular piece, I'm actually embedding bits of plastic in the paper that I made. And the other thing is that I think we have this relationship to the ocean on a molecular level, because there's the same amount of salt in our blood as in, or same percentage as in sea. So we, you know, there is this relationship, you know, very far back in Earth, or in the creation of of the planet, I guess. So that's, you know, that's sort of in a nutshell how I kind of, the two things are important to me. And they're sort of always intertwining between the beauty of the ocean and wanting to express that, to talking about, let's stop destroying the ocean.
Did anyone want to add to that? Karen Lee?
No, and that was just so beautiful and moving. And I just want to add that I think part of how we avoid the issue is we kind of tell ourselves, oh, the ocean is so vast. It can just clean itself. It can heal itself. It really doesn't matter if we keep just adding, you know, tons of plastic to it. And it's tragic. And so, you know, to be expressing that vastness and also reminding people, you know what, it's right here in all of our veins is part of how we can make that not only personal, but intimate connection.
Well, I find it interesting, Karen, that you spoke about, you know, your swimming in the ocean and how important that is to you. And mine is, you know, sailing on the ocean. It's like, that's, you know, that's where I meditate sometimes. Sometimes I'm racing or I'm terrified, but. So I find that's interesting.
I have to admit, as a child, I grew up on the Jersey Shore, and I learned how to swim before I learned how to do anything else. And that involved going to the ocean from 8 o'clock in the morning to 8 o'clock at night. And to me, it's the place where I go to when I want to find some solace. So, well, so now the next question. Karen Lee, you might want to take yourself off mute. So Karen Lee, are you optimistic about humanity's ability to combat the detrimental effects of climate change? How is the hope or lack of hope reflected in your work?
At my core, I'm an optimist. I know that miraculous change can happen, and I also know that that requires hard work, tremendous concentration, and tremendous cooperation. The first step is to acknowledge the problem, name the conflict. So when I'm making my art, I'm kind of channeling intuition as well as information and connecting with very raw emotions. Some are beautiful, some are benevolent, and some are evil. And they just kind of all matter because they're all part of our reality. And I love listening to what people say when they look at my work, because people see things that I didn't paint, that I didn't know were there. And that's very, very meaningful to me, because I learned so much, and it tells me that that people are engaged and communication is really happening. So I want to just tell a little history here that spans from 2001 till 2019. In 2001, I audited a course at Harvard Medical School. It was given by the Center for Health and the Global Environment. The Center for Health and the Global Environment was created by two MDs, medical doctors who understood that human health and the health of the world are basically the same. Both of the founders, Dr. Paul Epstein, the late great Dr. Paul Epstein, and Dr. Eric Shivian, each won a Nobel Peace Prize in different areas. Paul taught us that, sure, there have always been extreme weather events, what will the difference be as the Earth warms up? The difference will be their frequency, their intensity, and their timing. And now, of course, we see weather as headlines and Eric spoke of our being engaged in a vast, uncontrolled chemical experiment. As the climate news became increasingly dire, sometime around, I don't know, 3 or 4 years ago, I went to Eric and I said, Eric, I'm really, really worried. And he said, you know, Karen Lee, as long as the Greenland ice sheet remains intact, we're fine. So within 2 or 3 years after that, what's the headline? Greenland ice sheet. Oh, it's really, really, really shedding ice, all that fresh water into the sea at an alarmingly rapid rate. So the painting that we're seeing here, which is Goddess Greenland melted, she's battered, but she's still here. She's trying. It's almost like her spirit is like trying to hang itself still into the body and continue to protect and defend. I feel like vocabulary matters too. So we used to talk about global warming. Then we talked about climate change. In December of 2019, the British journal, The Guardian, introduced the term climate crisis. And now that's the language that we use. And I feel that's extremely important because it raises the awareness that we really, truly are in a crisis here. So I'm really fortunate because I personally have survived a medical death threat. And I wrote a book about that, that experience going from sickness to health. I illustrated it with my art. And I'm really happy to tell you that this book is helping save people's lives around the world. So yes, I believe in the impact of storytelling. Yes, I believe in the transformative, almost miraculous power of art. And yes, I am an optimist about our ability to combat detrimental effects of climate change, but we really need to start like immediately and unanimously and globally.
So I'm sure some of the other artists would want to comment on their hope or lack thereof as well. Resa?
You know, it's sometimes I think it doesn't really matter because our presence here as human species is just a second in the scheme of the life of the universe. And so we'll perish and that's okay. And the earth will survive and go on to be something else. Maybe it will inhabit humans, maybe it won't. So that's how I'm able to sort of live with the tragedy that unfolds every single day. Like all the rain now has microplastics in it, all of the rain. COVID is here because we're encroaching on land, deforesting land, and encroaching on the animals' habitat. So I think we may have outlived and overused our resources to such an extent that there may not be a way to turn around. And those who survive here, well, long after I'm gone, will find a way to survive, or they'll perish also. And the earth will become something else. It'll heat up, and then 1,000 or so years later, it might get cold again. But at a certain point, that doesn't mean that I stop caring and protesting or signing petitions or writing letters. I still do all of that, but I also have to live with the reality, which is right here in front of us. So that's my thought on that.
Joan, did you want to add something?
Yes, living in Narragansett Bay, it's like there's Clean Ocean Access, there's Sailors for the Sea, there's Save the Bay. And I've watched over the years how, an impact, like we can only do what we can individual, like in where we're at, I guess. And so I've watched things improve, and that to me is hopeful.
Well, I think that this is a good opportunity to move on to the questions where we're just going to open it up for all three of you simultaneously. So that question is, climate change art is often used to make, hold on a second, slide. Oops. There we go. Climate change art is often used to make hard data more accessible to a broader audience. How do you make sense of the available scientific information and distill it into a visual representation? What is your creative process? Resa, do you want to start?
Yeah, I'll just go since my painting is there. So I don't actually research hard data, but I read a lot of articles from scientists and professionals about the climate crisis. And I distill what I learn through news and articles, and then take some of those subjects and make work that hits me hard. But the problem, or maybe, I don't know if it's a problem, is that there are too many subjects. I started off with climate change work over 10 years ago because of the movie Gasland, and I was concerned about fracking. And now fracking is like so far back in my head. I mean, right now there's so many other things. The Arctic Circle was over 100 degrees the other day. The permafrost is melting, and all of this nitrogen and CO2 is coming up through that permafrost that's been buried for thousands of years. So there's so many issues, and it's vast. So I have no problem finding material to make artwork out of these issues, but it's also mind-boggling and distressing at the same time.
Karen Lee?
Resa, everything you just said, I completely share. It's like there's too much happening. There's too much we have to say, and it's like every day it's worse, and it's more widespread, and it's just insanely tragic. And back to the earlier point, a lot of this is due to our human beings having assumed that we can just take over everything, and in that process destroy it, because species are interdependent. Biodiversity depends on diverse habitats. Joan, to your point about, things in the sea that might cure cancer, Eric Shivian, whom I referred to before, taught in his class how there are so many creatures in the sea which contain substances that might transform our medical care naturally. Substances in cone snails that are more powerful as painkillers than morphine, with zero addiction properties. So there's so much here still to be learned. I also just wanted to say that, can I just go on from there?
Sure.
Or I can.
No, go on, Caroline.
I just wanted to say I've already discussed how my process is really visual and visceral, and I believe that when our work connects with people at that gut level, it also registers in their minds and their thoughts. There's art being made by people besides us, and on this topic, and you can see them at the climate marches. In April of 2017, in the Washington, D.C. Climate March, we just had the 3 hottest years on record. And of course, that's all been superseded. And some of the signs said, love your mother. There is no planet B. And very simply, I'm terrified.
Joan, did you want to continue?
Well, I was just going to say, to answer that in terms of, I sort of go at it, I guess, in a slightly different way, is that, and then I'm an optimist also, but, I sort of, all this information, for me, it's sort of like in a blender in my head. And when I'm working in the studio, something sort of strikes me, whether it's, something I read recently or something I read a long time ago. Sometimes it's an interpretation of certain words that I've read in articles. And this sort of drives the process, and it drives my color. And it sort of, there's this, not the work as it forms becomes more concrete into what the idea is. It's like I don't preconceive the idea when I'm working. And this really, for me, draws on this thing where I'm an artist and I'm a sailor. And, in the sailor, I'm in the ocean. And there's this tension between control and surrender. And so I really embrace the unpredictability of being on the ocean and of the materials and processes I use. So I feel like what I'm talking about is also really important on how it drives my process.
Fascinating. So now we're going to go on to the question that I think there will be an awful lot of discussion on. So this is for all 3 of you. So since Making Waves has opened, the world has changed dramatically. First with COVID-19, the pandemic, and then with the anti-racist movement. So what we're wondering is, how have these circumstances affected your work, and how do you think they'll affect your work? Who wants to start with that one?
Joan, why don't you go?
Okay, I can do that. Well, it was interesting because when this first started, it's not like I'm not in my studio all the time. So, and I'm on an island, and I'm sort of, I say sometimes I kind of live in Disneyland, because I didn't see, the boarding up, and Jamestown is very quiet in the winter. So, but what was interesting, but because of this constant bombardment of information about COVID-19, I couldn't work. It was replacing the place where my brain thinks, I guess, creatively. That's probably how I would say. And, you can't forget about the fact that we may never travel again the same way. We may never be showing work the same way. I don't know when I'm going to fly again. So that's really affected things. But then as it's progressed along, I read an article in the New Yorker, which gave me an idea for some new plates. And so in the last couple of weeks, I've been making these 5 by 9 foot plates for some new pieces.
Resa, did you?
What was the topic of the piece you read in the New Yorker?
It was about the fact that masks and gloves are getting through the filters and are ending up in our waterways. I mean, one problem creates another. And it just fascinated me that, that they're fine enough that they're getting through the filters. I wouldn't think they would be. You would think that gloves and masks would clog up, but something about the materials they're getting through. And of course, I'm finding them on the beach, oddly enough. I could send you the exact, I have the article upstairs. I can, if you want to read it, I can send you the info, but. Okay.
Our mark is everywhere. Our human mark is absolutely everywhere. There's not one place. I did a residency in the Arctic Circle, and my husband and I went to Greenland. But even in the Arctic Circle, where nobody lives, we found one of our chores was, when we'd go on these little spits of island, is we clean up the trash. And there was plastic, toothbrushes, those dental floss plastic thingies, fishing net, I mean, you name it, combs, you know, flip-flops. Not a lot that I saw on my trip, but they clean the stuff up constantly. So it's constantly flowing in from the Atlantic Ocean. And it's sad to go, you know, to be, you think you're at the top of the world and there's no one else around, and then here's all this junk. It's very sad. Anyway, regarding this question, I also couldn't paint. I couldn't work. I was so scared and worried and anxious when the pandemic showed up. But I forced myself to go to the studio, and I have a big painting that I was working on that dealt with the Australian outback, the Australian fires. And I switched over to thinking about how people were sick and having fevers and in the hospitals. So the painting morphed. But even when I went to paint, my hands were shaky. I was so full of anxiety, just listening to the news and thinking about what was going on around the world, because it did feel like the end of the world in some ways. And regarding the anti-racist movement, well, I've been sort of marched in marches and wear my Black Lives Matter shirt for several years now. A big proponent of equal rights for all. So it didn't affect my work directly because I don't feel it's not my story to tell, but at the same time, I can do things to help others, people of color, Black people. And so this time is just very unusual. I also feel like making art seems rather pathetic in the face of all of these terrible issues. But we do what we have to do and what we like to do, what we know how to do.
Well, it's also kind of here is this COVID-19 that's killing, millions of people. And yet on the flip side, there's less air pollution, and now one can see the sea life in the Venice Canal. I mean, there are some odd things going on in the world right now.
Yeah, but I don't know how long that's going to remain. If we go, the world is much bigger than the US, and there are billions of people in China and India who also want air conditioning and cars and clothes and et cetera, et cetera. So the demand on the resources and food is, I do think people will go back to living the life that they had before, maybe slightly changed. So unless we drastically change things, make airline tickets so expensive that the average person won't fly anymore, that could be a way to do it. Raise gas prices so people drive less, et cetera, et cetera. I don't know how we're going to stop people from consuming.
Karen Lee, did you want to?
Yeah, I really share the feelings of anxiety that almost can't have a name to it. And occasionally I'll wake up and kind of have this sense of, it's a normal day, and it's not, and it won't be for any of us who pay attention to the science for a very long time. It's so complicated. I mean, of course, people who live in poverty are people who live densely are much more subject to dire circumstances from COVID-19. We know that in this country, tragically, our Black population tends to have so many pre-existing morbidities that contributes to COVID-19 related mortalities. I feel, I hope, and in my way, I pray that from all of this, we really can come out better, that we can come out with an equally just society for everybody. There's I should not be going to marches, but I do from time to time. And there is a tremendous rhythm. It's like the rhythm of the sea. It's a momentum that I feel is only going to continue. I don't think we're going to see this momentum cease anytime too soon. I also just want to say that medicine, like art, is very much a creative process. And as I've already said, I believe that art, like medicine, can heal. The doctor who saved me is now focused in virology, and he is aiming to use one of the drugs he's developed as a treatment, which could really benefit COVID-19 patients. So just like in our conversation here, there's like a cross-fertilization between what the world is doing, how we process it, how we then present it back out to the world. This is happening in the world of medicine. There's a lot to be very, very, very sad about right now. And I feel like conversations like this are so supportive for all of us.
Well, and speaking from someone who is in the business of art, I feel like some of the best art comes just from these times that we're experiencing now. So I hope that while it is discouraging and difficult, I hope that it is not paralyzing, because the only, I'm still of the opinion that, art needs to be meaningful. And, I think that, making art about things like this is important and meaningful. One thing I'd like to say also, the Child's Gallery has often, Child's Gallery takes on the persona of the people that are running it at any moment in time. So Stephanie and I, Stephanie is on here. Normally she's by my side. And I wanted to make a special thank you to Stephanie, because it was Stephanie who, I think primarily as a result of being a mother, has been so much more focused on the issues relating to climate change than me, and has really sought out all of these wonderful artists that are here making their presentations today. And so I'm grateful to her for that. And it's nice to be in the position to be sharing this kind of artwork with everyone. And I think the hardest thing for me on a selfish level, and I don't mean this, it really is being hard, was that we haven't been able to share this exhibition with the public, because I do think that art needs to be seen. Yeah. So I do want to reiterate that we do have limited hours now, and you can come in to see the artwork. What I would like to do now, and I'm hoping we can end on a positive note or an optimistic note, but I would like to see if people would like to ask some questions to the artist. There is one that came in for Joan, and it is again about the influence of the ocean, and this is asking about the influence of you as a sailor. So with you as an avid sailor, to what extent does the wind or air streams affect what you do in your work?
What streams?
The wind and air streams.
Well, I'd say one of the things with my work is that I always like them to feel like there's a sense of movement. And I think that is a carryover from like loving waves. And also there's this translucency to my work that is there because of, I always like looking down into things, like looking down into the ocean. And so there's never a traditional perspective in my work. It's more about looking through and seeing something else behind something, and maybe not always, it always isn't aware, you're not always aware of it, I guess. And I've done a lot of cruising, and when I'm done, I haven't doing it now, but when I lived in the Midwest, and I would draw while I was on a boat. So it's, you know, it's really a part of, it's been a part of my studio practice for a long time. You know, at one point before I was doing what I'm doing with climate change, I was really interested in maritime lore and navigation and, you know, movement. So it's always influenced my work one way or another. It's kind of odd too, since I'm from the Midwest, or it was. Now I'm living where I want to be.
So we do have the chat feature for people to ask questions, but you're just as free to unmute yourself and just ask if you'd like. So I'd love to have some questions.
I'd like to ask.
So I've had someone make a request to go through the gallery shots again, which I will. So here's a question. I think being an artist is extremely courageous. Do any of you think that your art or art that grapples with the difficult issues of the day can help or should play a role in making policy changes on a grand scale? That's from Nora.
I'll just, I wish it would help. I think it does in some sectors. I do think there are really outspoken mural artists and graffiti artists who have helped. And of course, as Karen mentioned, at the climate strikes, you see these amazing posters and signage. It's all art. But I also give talks at colleges and universities and about this subject when I show my work. And I feel like I try my best without being too, you know, too much of a lecturer, to mention a few things, like something as simple as having a metal water bottle instead of drinking out of plastic bottles, encouraging people to drive a little less, ride their bikes more. You know, there's only so much you can tell people to do. They have to want to do it. But the students are very open and receptive. I mean, I do tell them, I say, this is your future after all. So it's up to you to, you know, take the mantle and go forward and make the change where necessary.
So here's a question from everyone, that we've been hearing a lot about anxiety and hope, and we're wondering if you can include both in your present work. Karen Lee?
I most definitely do. So my mother was a doctor, and one of the medical journals that landed in our home every single month was quite small, maybe 6 by 9 inches. The back cover every single month featured the germ of the month. And I find myself painting germs of the month, which are all variations on, of course, COVID-19. And they will not be denied. They have names like retro rocket and corrosive explosive. So I would say that's one thing. And also still related to the Goddess series, there's something which is a kind of an environmental migration series. And the subtitle of that is Nowhere to Swim, Nowhere to Hide. It's a very large painting. The fish don't know where to go. They can't catch a current. Nobody knows which end is up. And the Earth from its from the equator is just slid aside. It's just not a globe anymore. It's kind of spooky.
Joan, did you want to, were you? No. Joan, you're on mute.
I know. I said, I wasn't raising my hand. I was yelling at my dog. So.
Oh, okay. So then there was a question that came for you. Let me, since you're So for Joan, you've spoken about your thoughts of control and surrender, both when you're on the ocean and in your process. How do you think COVID intersects with this idea of COVID and surrender?
Oy, oy, oy. Well, I think it's a matter that we can't, we can only control what's in our present environment. So, wearing a mask, avoiding trying to be infected. I mean, I can't control what my neighbor's doing. I can't control, what my friends are doing. I can't control what someone's doing across, the United States. So, that's, my control as the individual. And then I have to surrender to what's going to happen in the world. My hope is for the best.
So I think that this final question is good for everyone, and I think it's a nice way of summarizing everything. So how is the fact that basically billions of people abruptly stopped what they were doing and changed their behavior in a huge way to save one another affected your outlook on climate change mitigation and the anti-racism movement?
What a phenomenal question.
I know, it's a big one.
Very big one. I have to just qualify it by saying we're seeing that a lot of people can't maintain a changed habit for very long. And unfortunately, we see that with people at packing bars and packing beaches, and then unfortunately, but not surprisingly, packing hospitals. But I think there's tremendous affirmation here that we can acknowledge when something is absolutely critical. Let's just say life-threatening, like COVID-19, like racism, and ideally like the global climate crisis. Enough people really can and will stop what they're doing and really focus on this, and then exert sufficient pressure on governments and on businesses to change things quickly. It could happen.
I just want to say to that other question about anxiety and hope, that I think that as an artist, I can only speak for myself, but I think this is probably true for all artists, that we can't make work without hope. So even though this is a depressing subject and we feel depressed by it, many of us have innately within us hope. And that's why we make our work. That's why we function and get up every day. So I do think there's some kind of universal hope, but I'm not sure whether or not that, how that will affect the climate crisis. But we keep plugging on. And I'll just say one last thing. For those who can afford it, please consider getting solar panels for your home. I just want to tell you that we put them on last year and we have not paid an electric bill since. We get money back from the electric company every month, and we're generating energy not just for ourselves, but for the community at large. So if you're able to afford it, if not, you can buy your electricity from a solar farm. And that's one really wonderful way to help mitigate the climate crisis. Thank you.
Well, one thing I wanted to say was that, with COVID-19, the state of Rhode Island had a ban on all single-use plastic bags. Well, that went out the window because you can no longer bring your own bags in the grocery store. But then on the flip side, in terms of climate change, the ruling on gay and transgender rights may help with, because of the way Gorsuch voted, it may change the ruling on how they think about greenhouse gases. So, I always feel one thing may balance something out. It's like, I always feel like if we do a little bit, the ocean will heal itself. It's already trying to. So, I try to always have a positive thought in my head.
It's the Gaia Theory. The Earth is one organism.
Yeah.
Well, we are at 1 hour now, so I really wanted to thank everyone for attending. We had over 40 people at one point. the artists, Resa, Joan, and Karen Lee. You were fascinating to listen to, and your artwork is beautiful to see.
Thank you.
So thank you everyone for joining.
Thank you, Richard and Stephanie and Julie and Catherine. You did a great job. Thank you so much. And to
Thank you.
the artists.
Thank you. And to the viewers, none of us have seen the show in person. Just, just so you know this, not one of us.
I'm going tomorrow.
I'm going next week.
Good.
Thank you.
Bye.